Haribol.
Mahesh Panditji, are you prepared to lead us in kirtan?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Jai, Jai.
Thank you. Haribol. Yeah, we can start now. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pariprajaka Stotra Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jayādvaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kunikiri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Tham Ki Jai. Navadip Tham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol. Thank you so much, Maharaj, and thank you, Mahesh Pandit Prabhu, for leading us in Kirtan. And welcome to everyone for Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayādvaita Swami. It is Wednesday, July 6th, 2022. Tonight we'll be reading in the third canto in the fifth chapter, starting with text number 50 is what I have. Is that also what you have, Maharaj?
Yes.
Starting with text number 50, and looking forward to hearing everyone's questions, comments. Just take care, if you are going to be typing something in the chat window, to wait to post it until Maharaj is not reading there. That makes things go so much more smoothly. I'll be posting links so you can share this class with your friends and expand the kirtan in that way. And if you'd like to lead tonight's closing kirtan, you can send me a direct message, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you, and so glad you could be with us, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Kendra Prabhu, and thank you to all for being here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Nasuranam Asisan Vayanam Kutastha Adya Purusha Puranaha Tang Deva Shaktyam Gunakarma Yonao Retastvajayam Kavimadate Jaha. You are the original personal founder of all the demigods and the orders of different gradations. Yet you are the oldest and are unchanged. O Lord, you have no source or superior. You have impregnated the external energy with the semen of the total living entities. Yet you are unborn. Purport. The Lord, the original person, is the father of all other living entities, beginning from Brahma, the personality from whom all other living entities in different gradations of species are generated. Yet the Supreme Father has no other father. Every one of the living entities of all grades, up to Brahma, the original creature of the universe, is begotten by a father. But he, the Lord, has no father. When he descends on the material plane, out of his causeless mercy, he accepts one of his great devotees as his father to keep pace with the rules of the material world. But since he is the Lord, he is always independent in choosing who will become his father. For example, the Lord came out of a pillar in his incarnation as Nrsingadev, and by the Lord's causeless mercy, Ahalya came out of a stone by the touch of the lotus feet of his incarnation as Lord Sri Ram. He is also the companion of every living entity as the Supersoul, but he is unchanged. The living entity changes his body in the material world, but even when the Lord is in the material world, he is ever unchanged. That is his prerogative. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.3, the Lord impregnates the external or material energy, and thus the total living entities later come out in different gradations, beginning from Brahma, the first demigod, down to the insignificant ant. All gradations of living entities are manifested by Brahma and the external energy. But the Lord is the original father of everyone. The relationship of every living being with the Supreme Lord is certainly one of son and father, and not one of equality. Sometimes, in love, the son is more than the father, but the relationship of father and son is one of the superior and the subordinate. Every living entity, however great he may be, even up to demigods like Brahma and Indra, is an eternally subordinate servitor of the Supreme Father. The Mahatattva principle is the generating source of all the modes of material nature, and the living entities take birth in the material world in bodies supplied by the mother, material nature, in terms of their previous work. The body is a gift of material nature, but the soul is originally part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Om Jnana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurin Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadhati Shapadantikam Pandehang Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Shahagana Raghunathan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Pradijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Shahagana Lolita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Krishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Bodhi Priye Vancha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Pyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vashadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Tvam Nasuranamasi Sanvayanam Kurtastha Adya Purusha Purana Tvam Deva Shaktyam Gunakarma Yona Retastvajayam Kavim Adate Jaha. The demigods in charge of the elements of the material world, the constituent parts of the material world, are praying to the Lord because they have a service to do, but they're unable to do it because they all appear one after another and they're all acting separately. They're yet to be able to work in an integrated fashion for the pleasure of the Lord. So they want to pray for his help. So they're glorifying the Lord, in essence saying, you're the master and we're the servants. I found it interesting that in several places Srila Prabhupada glossed sa anvayanam with gradations. The living entities, the bodies of the living entities are not all the same. The living beings appear in graded species of life, some higher, some lower. That's simply how the material world is arranged. Sa anvayana. And they address the Lord. Kutastha, unchanging. Kutastha literally means situated on a peak. So the kutastha kshara Kutastha means transcendentally situated. Adya, you have no superior. And Purusha, you're the founding person of this world. Purana, the oldest. Shaktyam, Gunakarma Yonao. The Lord appears with his different energies, and with the Gunakarma Yonao, he's the source of material qualities and material activities. Reta Ajayam Kavim Adate Aja. You supply, you're the source of birth for begetting all the living beings. Sarvayoni Shakonteyas Sambhava Murtiya Sambhavantiyaha Tasam Brahma Mahadyoni Aham Bija Pradapita. The material nature serves as the womb for the living entities, the source of birth. But the Father who provides the seed is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I think I've told that story that Srila Prabhupada gave this as evidence for the existence of God when challenged. Can you prove that there's God? Prabhupada gave this proof that there's material nature, Mother Nature, and there are living entities, children, so there must be a Father. All right, are there some comments or questions?
Prabeen Prabhu has posted a verse in the chat.
Oh, yeah. This is a prayer by Arjuna addressing the universal form of the Lord. Swam Adideva Purusha Puranas Swamasya Vishvasya Param Nidhanam Betasi Vedyam Chaparam Chadama Tvayatatam Vishvam Anantarupa. Yes, you're the original person, you're the oldest, you're the resting place of the material world. You're everything. Good. Sarshati. Are all jivas ultimately the same age on the absolute spiritual platform? Yes, eternal. And yet we see in Krishna Lila there are different aged pure devotees, some parents, children of cowherd boys and girls, etc. Yes, everyone's the same age because there's no time in the spiritual world. Here, someone's lived for 12 years, someone's lived for 50 years. And as Prabhupada explained, that means 12 years dead, 50 years dead. This is the nature of time. But in the spiritual world, Nimeshardakyo vavrajati nahi yatrapi samaya. Not a moment of time goes by. So all the living entities are timeless, and yet they appear for Krishna's pleasure in different forms. Some as coward boys, some as coward girls, some as parrots, some as peacocks, some this way, some that way. So these are all transcendental manifestations. The children are not merely foolish children. The trees even are not foolish trees. All the living entities are fully conscious, and their bodies are forms of Satchidananda Vigraha, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So the living beings, yes. So they may have different ages according to Leela, but from another point of view, they're all the same age, eternal. Hope that's all right. Something else? Oh, Kendra Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. I had a couple of questions. The first one regarded this example that Srila Prabhupada gives where he cites Ahalya coming out of a stone by the touch of the lotus feet of Lord Ram. I'm not familiar with the example. Is this something that you could explain?
Could someone fill us in on Ram Leela here? Someone with proper background, maybe Saraswati or Praveen? Yes, no?
Prabeen says, Ahalya cheated on her husband.
Haribol, I believe what happened was that Ahalya was married to a rishi, and Indra was attracted to her, so he took the form of her husband and tricked her. And when her real husband found out that this is what had happened, he cursed her to turn into a stone. But she was to be released and liberated once Lord Ram came in with his feet. He touched the stone, so she regained her form and got mukti, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saraswati. I knew I could count on you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So actually,
I could have asked you also. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Actually, there was no fault on Ahalya's side at all. So even Ramchandra had to come and release her because he was so much in, I guess, favor of Ahalya. He said, I had to do this. And then while he was wandering, he liberated her. So that was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahesh Pandit Prabhu. Is that hand up again, Kendra Prabhu, or is that
it was for another point, but meanwhile Panchatattva Prabhu expands from first canto, little biodata on Gautama, where he speaks about this incident.
Mm-hmm. He was the husband of the famous Ahalya, who turned into stone when Indradev, king of heaven, molested her. Ahalya was delivered by Lord Ramchandra, and Gautam was her husband. Thank you for that, Panchatattva Prabhu, confirming what we've already heard.
Right. So the point that Prabhupada is making is that anyone, first he gives the example of the Lord himself, that he can choose how he appears, his fathers, etc., and also other living entities as suits him according to his Leela. They can also appear from stones, for example, by the touch of the Lord. So Krishna is not limited in how he appears, and neither are his devotees if he so desires. The other question that I had was that Prabhupada gives the argument here that essentially, he's given it in other places as well, that you look who is the person's father and who is their father, etc., etc., and if you find someone with no father, that is God, which I find very logical and I don't have any problem with. I'm just wondering if in your experience, you feel that this argument would be effective in a general audience, because I'm neither very learned nor an atheist, but I imagine there may be someone out there who could potentially take issue and say, well,
Well, it's not proof, of course, for those who don't accept Shastra. It's just a statement of Shastra that there is a point of origin. In person, however we, let's looking at it fresh. There's this, everything comes from somewhere. A reasonable person could admit to that there is a source of everything. We may not know what that source of everything is. That's another story. But the source of everything, by definition, has no source. So whether you consider Krishna the source of everything or you have some other candidate, there is a source for everything. And that source has no other source. I would start there.
Thank you very much. So then the contemporary idea, like you're saying, the source has no other source, is that if you try to mentally speculate your way to that, it becomes like the singularity rather than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They can't really explain it, but they arrive at a certain point and they can't go any further than that. And they say, well, everything comes from nothing, but it's a something nothing.
Yeah, they have. We can sympathize with the mental speculators. They have no solid place to tie their hope to. So they always have in mind, I suppose, the idea of infinite regress.
Yes.
And they know that infinite regress is problematic, that it doesn't lead anywhere. They're reluctant to get to a source of everything. I think we all have the experience that those who are rigidly opposed to the idea of personality of Godhead see him coming in advance and try to stake out try to fortify their city walls against him. So as soon as they hear that there's a source of everything, already we're too close, before we get to the point that source must be God or that it must be Krishna, they're already saying, well, why must there be a source of everything? Because they know where it's leading and they don't want to go there. So as Prabhupada said, it's simply stubborn obstinacy.
Thank you.
Something else?
Athena and Panchatattva have things in the chat.
Athena, Krishna's leelas seem to repeat themselves or take a similar flavor. Isn't that story similar to how Vishnu became the Shalagram Shila? Other similar stories like Karna being put in a basket, pushed down the river, and found, just like the story of Moses. Yeah, there are similarities between stories. And even in the material world, if you go to the precinct headquarters, there'd be so many records of various crimes, and they tend to take a certain form. They repeat themselves. And then the efforts of the police also are often similar. So I don't see, is this a problem or? Yes, there are similarities.
Just a similar, just an interesting comment or observation.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Panchatattva says to keep pace with the rules of the material world is one aspect of keeping pace. To allow determined atheists to say, oh, that Krishna, his birth was from a mother and father, just like anyone else. Yeah. On the one side, he keeps pace with the material world, and on the other side, because he does, the atheist can think that he's an ordinary human being. Okay. Anything else, or shall we read the next verse? Let's read the next verse. Tato vayam pramukha yadarte babhuvimat man karavama kimte tvam nasrachakshu paridehi shaktya deva kriyarte yadanugrahanam. O Supreme Self, please give us, who are created in the beginning from the Mahat Tattva, the total cosmic energy, your kind directions on how we shall act. Kindly award us your perfect knowledge and potency so that we can render you service in the different departments of subsequent creation. Purport. The Lord creates the material world and impregnates the material energy with the living entities who will act in the material world. All these actions have a divine plan behind them. Plan is to give the conditioned souls who so desire a chance to enjoy sense gratification. The plan is to give the conditioned souls who so desire a chance to enjoy sense gratification. But there's another plan behind the creation, to help the living entities realize that they are created for the transcendental sense gratification of the Lord, and not for that, not for their individual sense gratification. This is the constitutional position of the living entities. The Lord is one without a second, and he expands himself into many for his transcendental pleasure. All the expansions, the Vishnu Tattvas, the Jiva Tattvas, and the Shakti Tattvas, the personalities of Godhead, the living entities, and the different potential energies, are different offshoots from the same one Supreme Lord. The Jiva Tattvas are separated expansions of the Vishnu Tattvas, and although there are potential differences between them, they are all meant for the transcendental sense gratification of the Supreme Lord. Some of the Jivas, however, wanted to lord it over material nature in imitation of the lordship of the personality of Godhead. Regarding when and why such propensities overcame the pure living entities, it can only be explained that the Jiva Tattvas have infinitesimal independence, and that due to the misuse of this independence, some of the living entities have become implicated in the conditions of cosmic creation and are therefore called Nityabaddhas, or eternally conditioned souls. Well, there's Srila Prabhupada's take on the great origin of the Jiva Controversy, or the great fall of the Jiva Controversy. We're told that this is crucial for us to get involved in and debate and so on and so on. Prabhupada just brushes it off. Somehow or other, the living entity turns away from Krishna, and when he does so, he's entangled in Maya. Well, how this happened, when this happened, that we're not going to find out. They wanted to lord it over material nature in imitation of the Lord. When and why, that can only be explained by reference to Srila Jiva Goswami. I'm sorry. That can it can only be explained by understanding that the living entities have minute independence, which means that they can use it. Okay. Let's finish the purport. The expansions of Vedic wisdom also give the Nitya Buddhas, the conditioned living entities, a chance to improve. And those who take advantage of such transcendental knowledge gradually regain their lost consciousness of rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord. The demigods are amongst the conditioned souls who have developed the pure consciousness of service to the Lord, but who at the same time continue to desire to lord it over the material energy. Such mixed consciousness puts a conditioned soul in the position of managing the affairs of this creation. They're devotees, they want to serve the Lord, but they also want to be in charge of something on the level of creation. So then, mixed devotional service. The affairs of the creation, the demigods are entrusted leaders of the conditioned souls, as some of the old prisoners in government jails are entrusted with some responsible work of prison management. So the demigods are improved conditioned souls, acting as representatives of the Lord in the material world. And when completely free from all material desire to lord it over the material energy, they become pure devotees and have no desire but to serve the truth, but to serve the Lord. Therefore, any living entity, well, okay, there's a lot more here. I think what needs to happen is we need to change the guards here. That is to say, if someone would like to take over from me, I think I'm sufficiently, what's the word? Short on sleep that I'm drifting, as you've probably noticed. So rather than continue to drift, why don't I hand this over to whoever would like to pick it up from me?
Thank you so much, Maharaj. In preparing for today's event, I was in contact with Panchatattva Prabhu, who's made some notes on the matter, so perhaps if you'd like, you can share them or just pick up the baton from you wherever you're at and continue like that.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Therefore, any living entity who desires a position in the material world may desire so in the service of the Lord, and may seek power and intelligence from the Lord. as exemplified by the demigods in this particular verse. One cannot do anything unless he is enlightened and empowered by the Lord. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text 15, Mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. All recollections, knowledge, etc., as well as all forgetfulness, are engineered by the Lord who is sitting within the heart of everyone. The intelligent man seeks the help of the Lord, and the Lord helps the sincere devotees engaged in his multifarious services. The demigods are entrusted by the Lord to create different species of living entities according to their past deeds. They are herein asking the favor of the Lord for the intelligence and power to carry out their task. Similarly, any conditioned soul may also engage in the service of the Lord under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, and thus gradually become freed from the entanglement of material existence. The spiritual master is the manifested representative of the Lord, and anyone who puts himself under the guidance of a spiritual master and acts accordingly is said to be acting in terms of buddhi yoga, as explained in Bhagavad Gita 2:41. Vyavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahushaka yanantascha buddhayo vyavisayanam. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of 3rd Canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Vidura's Talks with Maitreya. Well, what I see first set up in this purport by Srila Prabhupada is the relative positions of the Lord and the living entities. All the different tattvas, Vishnu tattva, Jiva tattva, and Shakti tattva expansions are different offshoots from the same one Supreme Lord. Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport. And they're all meant for the transcendental sense gratification of the Supreme Lord. So it seems that living entities, especially the conditioned souls, their primary obsession is with sense gratification. And as we've seen in the previous verses, the manifestation of this extraordinarily complex creation, their desires are being, their field of activities is being arranged by the Lord. And now the demigods are requesting their marching orders so that they can work combinedly to facilitate this creation so that the living entities can be engaged. Now the question for the living entities is, am I going to be engaged in gratifying my own senses or gratifying the senses of the personality of Godhead? For the most part, the living entities don't understand their position as servants of the Lord. They, due to this nitya baddha status, eternally conditioned status, and due to the long, seemingly endless chain of action and reaction that they've been undergoing in the material world, they have little to no consciousness of the fact that they are actually supposed to be engaged in pleasing the senses of the Lord. The persons that do are rare and far between. And here, towards the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes such persons as expert spiritual masters. It's these enlightened beings who are fully engaged themselves in the service of Godhead, who can free the living entity from his entanglement in this business of I, me, and mine, which is the unfortunate predicament of the conditioned soul. In a previous class, the analogy, well, the metaphor of throwing stones into the water in the same place was given, and the ripples from those splashes remain concentric because they're all headed to the same target, and that allows for combined effort and unity of purpose. So essentially, that's what the demigods are asking for. Give us the directions by which we can act combinedly, in unity, in harmony, in your service. Anyone who takes even a brief glance at the events of today can see that that is not the condition for the ordinary jiva, especially the poor, suffering human beings of this Kali Yuga. It seems almost sometimes as if we're reaching a certain kind of, what would you call it, a turning point, a crisis point where things kind of fall off rapidly. It's interesting that at the very same time, at least in terms of historical time, the Krishna consciousness movement has appeared. I'm hoping just in the nick of time, because otherwise the situation is pretty grim. Everybody is at cross purposes, counter purposes. There's friction at every level of society. So here by the example of the demigods, we have the means of working in concert, appealing to the Lord, awaiting his instructions, particularly as received through the spiritual master, and working combinedly in order to bring a unified purpose to our existence, so that instead of gliding down to hell, which is the normal path of the living entity engaged in unrestricted sense gratification, one can make progress back home, back to Godhead. It's said here in the purport, some of the jivas, however, want to lord it over material nature in imitation of the lordship of the personality of Godhead. Regarding when and why such propensities overcame the pure living entities, it can only be explained that the jiva tattvas have infinitesimal independence, and that due to misuse of this independence, some of the living entities have become implicated in the conditions of cosmic creation and are therefore called nitya baddhas, or eternally conditioned souls. I'd made a comment in the chat box saying that it seems like debate on the origin of the jiva leads only to more debate. There's no resolution, and sometimes there's even, at least for those who are more inclined to want to be right at all costs, there's simply more potential to, engage in conflict rather than debate. So this is the best position to understand that we're conditioned, and regardless of the far distant origin of that conditioning, our present predicament requires certain steps. There's that old analogy given that the person is in the ocean, someone is throwing him a lifesaver, and he's saying, wait a minute, I don't know how I got here in the first place. Before I take this lifesaver, you have to tell me how I got here. Otherwise, I'm not taking. So we shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't be argumentative of our predicament, especially when there are so many who have successfully been rescued from the ocean of material existence, who have been able to cross over by this process of Krishna consciousness. The other thing that comes to mind in this purport is the example of the prisoners, the material world as a prison house, and the demigods being compared to reformed older prisoners. They're they're like trustees in a prison. They have relatively freer a freedom of movement compared to the other prisoners. They have more responsibilities than the less trustworthy inmates, and they're expected to engage in certain responsible actions in order to keep the prison running smoothly. They're still prisoners, but they're of a different rank. So the demigods are being compared here to such persons. They have some responsible position, but they're still in the government jail. And therefore, Prabhupada says, therefore, any living entity who desires a position in the material world may desire so in the service of the Lord and may seek power and intelligence from the Lord as exemplified by the demigods in this particular verse. And then Prabhupada refers to that famous verse, Sarvasya chaham vriddhisanavisto, matasmritir jnanam apohanam cha. That knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness is coming from Krishna. We can understand, knowledge, remembrance, but forgetfulness is also there. The living entity wants to forget his position. If he wants to be engaged in activities of the lower modes of nature, where he can be covered more or less completely and lose all conception of the higher purpose of his life, then that arrangement can be made. However reluctantly by the Lord, it can be made so that he can remain in these lower stages of existence. But the demigods, they're not at that stage. They want to work responsibly. And because of that, they are given serious tasks to take up, which govern the material elements and the lives of others in the universe. So, Hare Krishna, are there any comments, questions?
Saraswati Mata has something in the chat window. Are you able to see that?
Yes. Let's go up. Mother Saraswati says, I used to wonder how Krishna would experience pleasure upon accepting an offering by a devotee, since everything and everyone belongs to him already. One day on my birthday, my daughter, who was 3, wrapped my credit cards in newspaper and gifted them to me, and I accepted her gift with gratitude. Was a little surprised as she said the credit cards seemed important to me. Yeah. Where and I feel it's safe to say that what Mother Saraswati is indicating was she was accepting that gift with pleasure because her child was seeing that these are meaningful to my mother. So let me do this to make her happy. So that's a loving exchange and a kind of a nice analogy for our position. What are we? They aren't our credit cards. It isn't our material energy. And what do we have to offer? Like offering a lamp to the sun or drops of water to the Ganga. What do we have to offer? Except ultimately love and devotion. Muragupta Prabhu says to everyone, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, is there any information on where these primal demigods exist and how they are created before creation? That I cannot say. I take it from these texts that the demigods are there at this point in creation. They are simply waiting for they're announcing their fealty to the personality of Godhead and requesting instructions on how to act. I don't think this is a partial manifestation of the demigods. Like, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe that Vishwanath says that Krishna spontaneously gave them bodies with which to perform their prescribed duties.
Prabin Prabhu says, if I remember correctly from Valmiki Ramayan of Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, Ahalya did agree to enjoy with Indra in the form of her husband. Gautama would not curse Ahalya for fault of Indra. I don't know the details there. All I know is what Prabhupada put in that summary of Gautama Rishi, his origins and the mention of Ahalya there. That I don't know. I couldn't say. Kendra Prabhu has a question or a comment.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Along with what you were saying about the demigods acting combinedly in unity, it reminded me of a conversation Srila Prabhupada had with Giriraj Maharaj, where he called Giriraj Maharaj close to ask him something. And he said, I'm paraphrasing, I wasn't there, I don't have the transcript before me, but he asked Giriraj Maharaj, how do you think this movement is going to go on after I leave? And he answered his own question, intelligence and management, or something like that, wasn't it?
Organization and
Intelligence.
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, Giriraj Swami, from what I remember reading in his book, I'll Build You a Temple, answered, if I remember correctly, by saying if the devotees are chanting their 16 rounds and following the regulative principles and so forth, and Prabhupada said this also, organization and intelligence.
Yeah. And in regard to the middle paragraph of this last purport, where Prabhupada's speaking about the demigods, he says, such demigods are devotees of the Lord in the material world, which I thought was interesting because there's different ways to think of someone. He defines devotee in different ways in different places. And one might, in another context, think, well, devotee does not live in the material world. A devotee means wherever he is the spiritual world. But of course, we have a material world, we're in it. And he's expanding out how there's so many different mentalities of service and lack of service to Krishna, or just plain old sense gratification, that even within the material world, you can serve Krishna if that's what you want. You know, there's a place for you. I thought that was nice that no one is left out. There's such a wide spectrum of desire, and according to your own desire, whatever it may be, there's a place for you, either in universal management or at, as pond scum or whatever it may be.
Prabhupada describes them as mixed devotees. They have to have mixed because they have desires for some lording it over material nature at the same time in their devotional service. And, it's also in one sense kind of a cautionary tale for ourselves. We're given the Srimad Bhagavatam, the association of pure devotees, guidance of the spiritual master, and the opportunity therewith to come to a platform of pure devotional service, which isn't mixed. And wherever we may be at, speaking for myself in a very low platform, we know that that opportunity is there if we take seriously the instructions from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and tread our path very carefully, avoiding offenses to the holy name, offenses to Vaishnavas, offenses to deities, and on the positive side, carefully practicing devotional service. Then we don't have to necessarily stay in this material world to experience whatever we're going to experience as Kali Yuga progresses. And nor will we even necessarily rise to the level of demigods and stay on the platform of mixed devotional service. There's a real opportunity here, which is why the demigods are said to be pining for the opportunity to take birth in this middle planet to get a chance, because they know this is the real golden ticket to get out of here. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Untitled Prabhu.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
There's one more comment by Murari Gupta Prabhu that's very nice. I'll read it if it's okay. He says, on the fall of the Jiva, Mahaprabhu himself says, somehow or other, I have fallen into this ocean of birth and death. No further details.
You're muted, I think, Ikendra Prabhu. I'm not sure.
Sorry, I was saying we can have maybe a little kirtan if you like, and then Maharaj can take rest.
Maharaj is going to take rest ahead of the kirtan, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj, for
Thank you all.
this incredible sacrifice that you make on a regular basis. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you, Panchatattva Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thanks so much, Panchatattva Prabhu. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Also, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai,
Jayādvaita Maharaj ki jai.
Jai,
Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Premanande.
Hari,
Hari
Hari.
Hari Bo.
Thank you everyone. Come back and we'll see you tomorrow, Lord willing, for Chaitanya Charitamrita. And thank you again. Haribol, Haribol. Jai, Jai, Jai.
Hari, Hari Bo.